Hi everyone, this is the class discussion video on the ethnography. So typically if we were in, on campus during the normal semester where we, have be in class, I would spend a little time, at least a couple times in class, talking about the ethnography, what I want you to kind of take from it, giving you details about the assignment. And so since we can't really do that in class discussion, which is always a little better because you guys can ask me questions and also I can get you guys to kind of talk about it amongst yourselves. We obviously can't really do that in an ideal setting. So I'm just posting this short video to go over a few of these things with you. Okay, so the first thing is hopefully you do know, and there's no reason why you shouldn't since it's in the syllabus, and it's in at least 2 of the videos when I talk about the syllabus and when I posted a whole video just about accessing this book. So hopefully you haven't missed any of those like 3 or 4 different things that you have to write a paper for this class, and it's based on this book that you're all reading. So you have to write a paper for this course. It's a short paper. It's not a research paper. It's basically like a book review, which for most of you is probably a little less stressful, so that's fine. So this is the book that you're reading. The Headman Was a Woman. Now, I'm assuming most of you probably don't have the hard copy version, although some of you might. I know, I don't think it's very expensive to buy it on Amazon. I vaguely remember it being probably less than $15. And I know, I've always preferred having a hard copy version. But I know some of you, I'm assuming most of you probably have the ebook version. So if you purchased the main textbook through the CSN bookstore, it came in a package with the textbook, the annual editions, and the electronic, the ebook for the ethnography. And there's a video from the beginning of the semester where it's basically the camera's on my laptop screen, and you can see me showing you how to access the ebook. So if you watched that a long time ago and you forgot, or if you hadn't had a chance to watch it, please watch it. It's it's 5 minutes long, but it'll walk you through how to, if you had purchased it through the CSN bookstore in that package, it'll walk you through how to get access to the ebook version of this. So I'm assuming most of you probably haven't started reading this, and that's fine. That's why I'm posting this now. It's not a very long book. You could probably read it in an afternoon. I don't recommend doing that. I would split it up, but it's not very long. It's, it's 100 and, is it even 150 pages? I think it's about 150 pages, so it's not that long. And it's not, it's a really easy read. So I read this book when I was an undergrad, which is why I assigned it, because I thought, I enjoyed it. And I've read a few different ethnographies along the way, and this one's just always really good to me. Anyway, so if you haven't started reading yet, that's totally fine. I'm assuming most of you haven't. Most of you have been doing the annual editions, and so those are coming to an end soon. We only have a few left. And I had a student ask me about this, so I'll let you guys know. You can absolutely turn those in early. If you're look, we only have 3 left, or 4, or however many left. I just want to kind of get them out of the way. You can turn them in early if you want. You don't have to turn them in on the day that they're due. And I've had a handful of students who turned them in a little early, totally fine. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, so anyway, so I'm assuming most of you probably haven't started reading this. If you have, that's awesome. But like I said, I'm assuming most of you haven't, and we're going to talk a little bit about this right now in case you're concerned about what to do for this assignment, how to go about it. So the first thing is obviously you have to read the book. But also I have, and I'm going to be looking at this document off to the side, I have uploaded onto our Canvas shell a document that's been there since the beginning of the semester. Ethnography, paper, instructions, and helpful writing tips. So it's 2 pages long, and it just goes over a couple of things. And I'll go over this with you right now in this video, just to make sure we're all clear on some of these helpful writing tips and on the instructions for the ethnography and what I'm expecting. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about those first few chapters in the book. Okay, so if you opened this document, like I said, it's called Ethnography, Paper, Instructions, and Helpful Writing Tips. You'll see that the first part is I just have a handful of helpful writing tips for a science course. Now, if you're writing for a science course versus if you're writing for an English course or a history course, the requirements and the rules are quite different. And so I just want to make sure that when you're turning in something, whether it's even for the intro to cultural, which is still, we're still in the science, or especially if you're taking the intro to biological anthropology, that these rules would apply to there as well. Okay, so the first one is you want to avoid using the first or second person narrative. You never want to insert yourself into the whatever you're writing, whether you're doing a research paper or whether you're doing like a book review. You as whoever you are, like, should not be involved in this scenario. You should just be retelling either, like if you're writing a research paper, you're just giving the facts of the matter. If you're talking about the book, you're just summarizing the book. So you shouldn't say I read the book and I really liked it. Like, you shouldn't be inserting yourself at all into it in any way, shape, or form. So avoid the use of I or me or we or us or any of that. If you find yourself realizing you want to state something in a way that you don't really have another way of describing it, like, kind of just think about trying to use like the third person or not even using that type of narrative at all. And if you're really struggling, you can always email me and I'll help you with that. And I give a few examples. So instead of saying like I visited another country, you could say the country was visited. There are a few examples of taking yourself out of the scenario. And like I said, with this, it's not like you're reporting on your own research or something. With this, this number one shouldn't be a problem for you because you're just, summarizing the book. Okay, number 2, never use quotes. Please do not. What I do not want to get, and you will definitely be marked down for this, do not give me a paper that is just a bunch of quotes from the book. That's basically, I can do that. I can go through the book and pick out the best quotes. Like, I want this to be your own work. Now, obviously, I expect there to be, maybe you come across a particular passage that's like one sentence that's like, you're like, I really like the way this is expressed and stated in this very particular way. I don't want to reword it. You can absolutely put quotes around it, give me a reference to the page number, that's fine. But please do not make it excessive. And in general, most science writing, you never do that. For this, I'm allowing you just maybe, I'll give you a little bit of leeway with that because you're all writing a book review of the same book. And you might come across, a couple of, I can already think of a couple parts in this book that are really like great. Like the way it's worded is really particular and interesting. So if you feel like you want to quote, maybe a sentence here or maybe a sentence there, that's fine. But please do not give me, honestly, like if I see more than like 1 or 2 sentences, it's going to be an issue. And I've had this in the past where students it'll be like a paragraph quote. They'll give me a little bit of their work, like 2 sentences and like another paragraph quote. Like, I don't want a paper that's 90% this person, like these writers, I want your work. So please avoid quotes in this book. Or in this paper. Number 3, never use contractions. If you're not sure what a contraction is, I have some examples right there. So don't or hasn't, isn't, doesn't, wasn't. Spell out the word in full. Don't abbreviate anything. Do not, has not. You might be thinking, why does that matter? Culturally contextual. So like if you're reading to a broader audience might be reading your work, they might not understand those language specific abbreviations. And also, you don't want to get to the point where you're abbreviating things so much that it starts to not make sense. Like, I've had students literally in their like research papers type out to me and like turn in a paper that says like WTF or LOL. So, don't do that. Okay, number 4, never use cultural expressions, metaphors, or colloquialisms in scientific writing. Yes, so now we talked about these in the class, like about those, colloquialisms. You guys talked about it in the discussion board. There was the extra credit regarding that as well. And, we use these all the time in language. In fact, in the 9 minutes I've been talking, I've probably used one. Like, we don't think about it because they're part of our language experience. It's also a very complex and beautiful way of expressing ourselves. There's nothing wrong with them. But in a scientific setting, when you're writing a paper, when you're supposed to be relaying factual, objective information, you want to avoid those because you're not actually like relaying factual information. So like given these examples, like something, might spring to mind, but we all know what that expression means, but there's actually no spring involved. And if someone from another culture saw that, they probably wouldn't understand that. There also can be generational differences. So if you guys recall from the video on language, I talked about this. One of my aunts had said, hedge your bets. And I had never heard of that. And most people who I've heard say that are a little older than I am. So that's a generational thing. So you just want to avoid cultural expressions completely. Now, one might slip in, like I said, because these are a little harder for us to like catch when we're reading. We're like, oh, a contraction. You're like, obviously, correct that, but you might not notice if you use a cultural expression because we use them so frequently. So as long as they're not like excessive in your paper, like if there's one, I'll be like, okay. But if any of these are excessive, I'm going to know you like literally just didn't follow directions, and that's obviously not acceptable. And then of course, number 5, always proofread and spell check and grammar check. Like you, we have these great tools at our disposal that 98% of the mistakes can be caught using these, and then of course proofread at the end, just to make sure there's nothing that spell check or grammar check didn't catch. I know sometimes if you're writing a paper, like I don't even want to look at it anymore. I just want to submit it. But sometimes it just takes that last quick, skim. And also, if you have a friend in the class, since these papers are so short, have a friend like swap papers. It would take each of you like 5 minutes, and a fresh pair of eyes will catch things that you maybe your eyes or like brain is filling in. Like this part here you're missing a word, or something, and that could make or break a few points for you. So always important. Okay, so that's some general writing tips for you. Now let's talk about the actual paper. So like I said, you're going to read this book and you're going to summarize this book. Now it's up to you a few different ways of how you might want to choose to do that. But let's talk about the basic requirements. So here we have, here I kind of spelled it out for you, writing a review or summary of the ethnography. But also, like, I'm expecting some, like, the very basic things you'd find in any paper for, college course. You're giving me an introduction paragraph with a thesis statement. There's, the body or the main content, and then there's, like, a conclusion. So that's still required. So here are the actual requirements. So 3 to 4 pages in length, double spaced, so not that long. Now, I've given you 3 to 4 pages. If you find yourself going on to the 5th page a little bit, not a problem. What I don't want to get is a 10-page paper. I'm not trying to give you guys extra work. I'm sure you have multiple other courses that you're taking. I don't want the extra work. I'm reading like 60 papers, So, and you should be able to, with this short book, give me a very clear, concise summary in 3 to 4 pages without a problem. So like I said, if you find yourself going on to the 5th page a little bit, if you're like, finishing you're finalizing your conclusion paragraph, that's fine. But if you find yourself going on to like page 7 or 8, you need to think of kind of shortening it a little bit. And I know for some of you, like I have this problem too when I write for courses. It's, at the graduate level, it's a little different because it's like, 20 pages usually at the minimum, but you get, if any of you decide to like continue your careers in academia, you'll realize it gets harder and harder to summarize and be concise. You have so much to say. And so sometimes you're like, I barely started even talking about my topic until page 5, But for you guys, I'm assuming most of you don't have this experience. So 3 to 4 pages should be not too long, not too short for you. But there shouldn't be a problem being able to take this short book and give me the main ideas in 3 to 4 pages. However, this is a minimum of 3 pages. That doesn't mean you've written 2 pages and you're like 2 sentences on the 3rd page, like, 3 pages. No, it has to be 3 full pages. So I recommend, since the minimum is 3 full pages, I recommend going at least a little onto that 4th page. So okay, I have 3 full pages and a little bit onto the 4th page, so not a problem. So 3 to 4 pages, not 2 to 3, not 2 to not 1 to 3 to 4. Okay. So like I already said here, this is a short paper, but I still expect a well thought out response. I expect, the main point of this, like I said, I'm not trying to trick you guys. I don't want you guys to fail. I want everyone to learn something, and I'm not trying to overwhelm you guys with a lot of work. But I want you to obviously walk away from this class having learned something. I didn't, trust me, I know that one of my colleagues assigns 2 ethnographies, and another colleague that assigns an ethnography and requires her students to write a 10-page paper on it, so I'm not requiring that. What was I going to say? I forget there was a point to that. Okay, moving on. So standard 12-point font, Times New Roman. So I know this has been the standard for all of your assignments this semester, and it seems as if some of you are still struggling with this. Like I said, I'm not going to mark you down hugely if it's, like Calibri or something, but what I always do, most of you probably notice this with the exams, is that I put it in the correct format. And that sometimes changes, how much you've written. Don't adjust the margins, don't adjust the font, like keep it with the standard. If you're unsure of how to do that, if you're not sure how to maybe when you open Word or whatever application you use, you don't know how to access Times New Roman, like reach out to me or reach out to a friend, but that should be pretty standard for most of you. So just don't change that, don't adjust it. I've had this in the past, students try to give me, font, 15 font, and because they want to make the paper look longer, like I can obviously spot that. But also I can just look and see what the font is, so, just keep it with that standard. And I have here, give me a cover page. So I know you're turning these in via like email, but I still want that because what I want is the cover page with all the other information, like it has here your name, the date, the course name. So on that first page of the actual text, it's not just a bunch of filler at the top. You're actually just starting your first line of the ethnography. And then of course here we have on the next bullet point a concise summary of the ethnography. The headband was a woman. And continuing, it must include a thesis statement with, the general content, the body, the discussion part, and conclusion. You don't have to give me a works cited page because the only thing you should be citing is this, and everyone's citing the same thing. Like I said, if you decide to use a quote, a short quote, one, maybe two, please just reference the page number, and make sure there's quotes around it. But you don't need to give me page numbers throughout the whole ethnography, your whole paper. If you decide to do that I'm not going to mark you down for it. That's a lot of extra work, and I know that's probably good practice for other classes, but like I said, I'm not trying to overwhelm you. If you decide to do that, if you're used to doing it, that's totally fine. If every paragraph you're like page 3, page 7, like that's totally up to you. I'm not going to mark you down if you decide not to do that. It's really up to you. You don't need to give me, like I said, any particular citation style if you decide to do one, as long as there's some consistency. It's really up to you. You don't have to do that. It's not going to make or break whether you get like an A, I'm going to mark you down for like an A to a B or C or something like that. Like that's not the part I care about. I'm really more concerned about the content. And then like I said here, so you do not need to give me a works cited page. Okay. So now moving on to a little bit more about the actual content. You might be thinking, okay, well, summary, that's kind of vague. What exactly does she want me to do? So there are a few different ways you can do this. In fact, there are kind of like two main ways that I've seen students do it in the past. One is, so there are 7 chapters. So I've had students who write an introduction and then they have 1 paragraph per chapter. And they just, give me a brief summary of each chapter. And by the time that you do that, you've already written, 3 to 4 pages. And then you write your conclusion and you're done. So that's absolutely a way you can do that. Now you might be thinking, how do I summarize, a whole chapter into 1 paragraph? Now these chapters aren't particularly long. Each chapter tends to have a theme. You can, you can kind of try to summarize the whole chapter. You can kind of pick one important thing from the chapter and talk about that for the paragraph. That's totally fine. So that's one way of doing it. Like I said, having an introduction, having, 1 short paragraph per chapter, and then a conclusion, and then there you go. You have a nice, great summary, 3 to 4 pages without a problem. Totally acceptable. The other way I've seen students do it is to kind of pick at a certain theme they see throughout the ethnography and talk about that theme kind of for each chapter, like give or take, if that makes sense. So they might, discuss, one of the big ones is, like religion. They might discuss, religion or rituals, and how chapter 1 discusses that in chapter 3, and how chapter 5 gives multiple examples in chapter 7. So as long as I know that you have read this entire book, and you're either, like I said, giving me a kind of a brief summary of each chapter, or you're picking a larger theme and kind of talking about it throughout the book, that's fine too, whichever way you decide. Or maybe you have another way of kind of doing it. As long as it's clear that you are summarizing not just like chapter 1 or not chapter 7, that it's clear that you read the entire book, and you can summarize it in some way, that's totally fine. I'm going to be kind of looking for key elements, but just because there are certain themes in the book that are like, if you don't mention them at least once, I'm going to know you probably didn't read the book. And this brings me to this last part of what I'm going to talk about right now. Okay, so I was hoping this video would be less than 20 minutes, but I'm already at just about 20, but I just have a couple more things to say. Okay, so just to kind of get your brains kind of thinking about this a little bit more, is I've written out a couple of questions, and this is usually what I do in classes. I put these on the board, and I give everyone like 10 minutes to kind of discuss amongst their neighbors, and then we kind of discuss as a class. And this is just a way, now I'm going to show, I've written them down on my little board. And I'll send you guys like in an announcement too, like, so you're not having to like read this, but I try to use this board as much as I can. Do not take these questions and then use this as like an essay for the ethnography. That's not what the point of these questions are. The point of these questions are like, so say you haven't started reading the ethnography yet, and you're like, okay, I have to read this book, and I'm supposed to write a summary at the end, but there's probably going to be a lot of information. That's where I'm here to help you. If you kind of think of these questions that I'm presenting right now and think, okay, she asked these questions, maybe I should be paying attention to those things as I read, and those could be things I focus on when I write my summary of chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3, keeping in mind these questions that I asked, just to get your mind thinking about what things are probably more important, what things I'm hoping you kind of pick out of it. That's it. So don't take this question and write an essay about this question. That's not what I want you to do. This is just a way of helping you know. You could be watching this video right now and you could stop it right now and you don't even have to look at these questions. That's totally fine if you feel comfortable doing the assignment. Like I said, the summary of the ethnography. These are just if you want a little extra guidance in terms of like as you're reading or maybe reflecting on what you've already read if you've already started reading, some of the main ideas that you want to kind of think of. So I've just written out 4 kind of discussion questions or, thoughts on, like I said, themes you might want to be picking out. So the first one, how do the Batek view sex differences or similarities regarding their religious, spiritual, or ritual practices? So this is something you're going to see in multiple chapters. So this is very interesting. You're going to see a lot of discussions on sex and gender. So that's kind of a major theme throughout the book. But also there's some really interesting stuff on like the religion, their origin stories, rituals. And so that's just something interesting to think about. The next one, how do the Batek view menstruation? So there's a very particular passage about this. I think it's in chapter 2. And some similarities to this concept are going to come up later in the later chapters. So right now I'm only kind of bringing up some topics that are in chapters 1, 2, and 3. I'll do another video, I think it's like next week or the week after, on chapters 4 through 7. Question number 3 to kind of get you thinking about some stuff. How do the Batek view personal autonomy? So this one's really important. Personal autonomy. So if you're not sure what that is, Google it. And then how does that relate to sex or age differences? Like, is there a distinction? Is there not? Something to think about. And how do the Batek view violence? So this one's very interesting. I really want you to kind of read. I don't want to give anything away on this. And then also just in general, how are these things generally related? Do you see like a theme of like sex differences or age differences or not at all? Maybe it's very different than how you would assume it based on your own culture. And that's always something interesting to think about is like, as you're reading this, comparing it to like your own culture, what are the differences? Because there will be some. What are the similarities? Because there also will be some on that too. So like I said, these are just some ways of kind of thinking about as you're reading, like, okay, she'd mentioned violence in that one question. Maybe I should kind of think about that as I'm reading these chapters. Maybe that's a point I want to make in my summary. So I'm hoping this was helpful for you guys. Like I said, I'll post these questions for you on the, because in case you're like, I can't, that's like scribbly or tiny, I can't really read it. I just try to be in teacher mode as much as possible with using my little board. And I'm wishing I got a bigger one, but that's fine. What was I going to say? So I'll be posting a second video going over this stuff, and I'll post a few more questions kind of going over chapters 4 through 7. I think I have that on the syllabus is coming up soon. And hopefully by then you all have at least started reading the book. And I would recommend that since right now this is the class discussion video on chapters 1 through 3, you try to get through chapters 1 through 3, and then, chapters 4 through 7 a little later, and then you look at that due date, which is, coming up in a few weeks. You have plenty of time. But if you, procrastination is, not good. So if you kind of read a chapter here, chapter there, you'll get to the point where you're like, oh, I've already read the whole book. Now I just have to sit down and write this very short, easy paper. If you have any questions about any of this, if you want to give me a rough draft, if you're concerned that maybe it's not, you want some tips, I'll be more than glad to help you with that. Don't submit it 2 hours before it's due and be like, this is my rough draft, help me. Give me a little extra time than that. But anyway, okay, so hopefully this was helpful to you all, and I will see you guys on the next video.